Now, let's get to the story of Adam and Eve and explain. Now, I want you to look at pictures of the Egyptians. You would notice on the forehead they have the snake. When you look at ancient Greece and Rome, or you can even go to Mexico, all over the world, the snake was a revered or respected, and the snake meant Buddhism because the snake meant wisdom. You understand this. The cobra is in Egypt. Now, the cobra is not indigenous of Egypt, but this shows us that the Naga people brought their religion to ancient Egypt. You see this in Nubia because the Nubia were people of African descent. Now, first of all, let's go to the Go Show and let's look at what Nichiren Shonin teaches us. Now, we at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association practice the teachings of Nichiren Shonin, who we call the messenger of the Buddha. He is Bodhisattva Jogyo, or some people call him Bodhisattva Superior Practices, but they're one and the same person. But let's look at what Bodhisattva Superior Practices or Nichiren Shonin says. He says now, in the Go Show, the opening of the eyes, it reads, there are 3 types of doctrines that are to be studied. They are Confucianism, Brahmanism, and Buddhism. If we are going to study Buddhism, ladies and gentlemen, then we must also understand the teachings of Brahmanism to get a clear view to understand the Garden of Eden, the story of Adam and Eve, because the story of the Garden of Eden and the story of Adam and Eve is a Buddhist teaching. Now, what happened was the Brahmans distorted the teachings. Now, understand, the Japanese are not going to teach you this because what they teach more Japanese culture. They teach a Buddhism of Japanese dominance as opposed to the teachings of Nichiren Shonin or the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. Now, in the Go Show, True Aspect of All Phenomena, it reads, exert yourself in the 2 ways of practice and study. Without practice and study, there can be no Buddhism. You must not only persevere yourself, you must also teach others. Both practice and study arise from faith. Teach others to the best of your ability, even if it is only a single sentence or phrase. So, ladies and gentlemen, Nichiren Shonin encourages us to study. He never said, study what the Japanese teach. He wants us to study Buddhism to get a true understanding. And to get a true understanding of Buddhism, he says there are 3 doctrines to be studied. They are Confucianism, Brahmanism, and Buddhism. Now, in the Go Show, the 3 Tripitaka, Masters Pray for Rain, it reads, these non-Buddhist teachings came about through a mistaken readings of various sutras of Buddhas who preceded Shakyamuni Buddha. The Brahmans hated the Nagas. Now, what they did was part of the Buddhist teachings. Now, let's look at part of the Buddhist teachings talk about the story of Adam and Eve. The story of Adam and Eve actually comes from Buddhism. But what the Brahmans did, the Brahmans distorted the teachings of Adam and Eve. Now, there's a book, as we told you, about the Anaclipses. It was written in about 1860 by British historian Godfrey Higgins. And Godfrey Higgins, on, I think it's page 403, he talks about the Garden of Eden, and this is what he says. He says, quote, Mr. Franklin says another striking instance is recorded by the very intelligent traveler Wilson regarding a representation of the fall of our first parents, sculptured in the magnificent temple of Ipsambul in Nubia. He says that a very exact representation of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is seen in that cave, and that the serpent climbing the tree is especially delineated, and the whole subject of the tempting of our first parents most accurately exhibited. How is the fact of the mystos of the second book of Genesis being found in Nubia? Nubia, this is in Africa. He said probably 1,000 miles above Heliopolis to be accounted for, except that it came from Upper Egypt with the first Buddhist or Gymnosophist. See, the first Buddhists came into India. Like, look at this picture of the Aphodemak Temple in Nubia, Sudan. See, the Aphodemak Temple was a Buddhist temple, and you see the Lotus Sutra in this temple. The Lotus Sutra was practiced in ancient Nubia, Sudan, and Africa 1,000 years before it ever even got to Japan, before even the Lotus Sutra was translated into Chinese by Kimura. Now, let's kind of talk about the Garden of Eden from the standpoint of Buddhism. And let's do a compare and contrast with that of what the Brahmans teach. Now, what the Brahmans did, the Brahmans took the snake, which was the symbol of Buddhism. If you look at the pictures above, let's look at China. China, you got the dragon, you got the snake. See, when you look at the ancient pictures of the Buddha, you will see the Buddha with 7 snakes, because the snake was a part of the Naga culture. When you look at the Buddhist temple and you see the snake or the dragon, this is Buddhist teachings. But now what the Brahmins did, the Brahmins hated the Buddha, and what they did was they made the snake an evil creature. Now, let's talk about the story of Adam and Eve from the standpoint of Buddhism. Buddhism is a teaching of enlightenment, and the story is an allegory of Adam and Eve. What the story means in Buddhism is that there's a man and there's a woman, and there's procreation. What that means is there's birth and there's death. So Buddhism talks about cause and effect. The story of Adam and Eve is a story of cause and effect. Cause was the man. Cause was the woman, because they got the knowledge. The snake represents wisdom. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the medical, just look at an image of the medicine logo, you're going to see snakes. You look in Egypt, you're going to see snakes, because the snakes represent wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Adam and Eve had to procreate, and that's what it means, procreation. They also used the snake because the snake changes its skin every year. That is, the snake is renewed. That's the incarnation of the snake, changes himself and makes himself new, because life is cyclic. You're going to see the snake sometimes with the tail in its mouth and the egg, because it represents the eternity of life. So it is not about an evil person, but the story of Adam and Eve is a Buddhist story talking about the law of cause and effect. It talks about the birth and death of man and a human being, and it talks about life being cyclic. So that's a quick Buddhist lesson. We hope that you got something out of it. You should know that the story of Adam and Eve originally came from the Buddhist teachings. And what you see, or what you see in the Bible, is the story of the Brahmans' distortion of the teachings. You would also find that throughout history there was Buddhism and there was Judaism, and actually the tribe of Judah were Buddhists who came from India. So when you look back into history and you look back into the culture, or when we people of African descent look at Buddhism, Buddhist history is actually black history, because the Buddha was a Nubian or the Buddha was a Naga, and this is part of the story. Now, you cannot accurately learn Buddhism without knowing the true history of Buddhism, and we're showing you that the Japanese are not teaching the true history of Buddhism because they cannot go back and tie Buddhism in with Egypt, Ethiopia, Abyssinia, because those were black empires and they practiced Buddhism. Buddhism did not get to Japan until 1,000 years after the death of the Buddha. Hope you learned something from this quick Buddhist lesson. I'm Anthony Elmore, President of Proud Black Buddhist World Association. We teach Buddhism inclusive of African and African American culture and history. Thank you very much.
The world-honored one they call the Buddha. He preaches highest teachings in the Lotus Sutra. I bring this message to you as a rapper. I explain to you the expedient means chapter. The Buddha emerged from his profound meditation. He honored the world with his preaching obligation. To make the people happy, he knows what to do. He speaks to his disciple, Sharapu, to teach to the masses on the Buddha's note ingredients. The Buddha teach using the law of expedience. The wisdom of the Buddha is profound and immeasurable. Understanding his teachings is quite incredible. The road the sutra to